All right, welcome in and a very happy Wednesday evening to you. In-game live game day here on the SportsGrid Network. Joe Raineri alongside Craig Mish, and we are getting ready for a little nightcap in the World Cup as Czechia taking on Mexico. That'll be game one that we're going to be keeping an eye on. And then South Africa and South Korea, all of this with at least one desperate team in these games taking on two teams here, certainly in South Korea and Mexico, that kind of they control their own destiny here. They win, they tie, they got nothing to worry about. They lose, well, then they might have something to worry about. Any which way you cut it, Craig, we got ourselves some urgency here tonight in the World Cup, and quite honestly, there's nothing better than urgency when we're talking about these games right now.
Yeah, good evening, Joe. And look, we're at the knockout stage, I think, for a few teams tonight. As Joe mentioned, we got two matches tonight that we'll be keeping a close eye on. You know, I think for me, from what I see in terms of the scoring and, of course, in the stage that they're in, it seems to me Mexico is in almost no matter what they do. And I think the odds, Joe, represent that. They're really not a huge favorite today, which tells you that they could tie or they could lose. And so certainly Czechia has to win without a doubt. You know, the thing in the other match I think that's a little bit compelling is that South Korea may not need to win. Maybe just a tie or a draw would get them into the next round. So that's a possibility. And then, of course, the team that they're playing is absolutely going to have to win in South Africa. They have to win or they're out. And even with a win, it's not guaranteed that they are going to move on. But certainly there were some fun matches earlier today as well. One close to us here, Joe, at Hard Rock Stadium. They're calling it Miami Stadium. I had a chance to meet a lot of the fans from Scotland at Lone Depot Park on Monday night. I was rooting for them, Joe, to keep it real because they were just so nice and so much fun, but they did not show up. At least their players did not show up today against Brazil. The final 3-0. So naturally Brazil will move on and Scotland's in some serious trouble at this point. You know, I thought from that match and watching that a little bit today, it's interesting that one of the best players in the world that used to be Neymar Jr., who clearly is not himself. He's hurt. He's coming off the bench, but still had an impact in this game. But Brazil, clearly one of the favorites to win it all. They're going to move on. South Florida definitely buzzing. Everywhere I went, Joe, was World Cup today. Driving back from Miami, from Lone Depot Park coming up, it took me from Miami to get to Hollywood, which is where I live, an hour and 30 minutes in the middle of the early day on I-95 and 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. And it just everyone was headed that way with the flags and everything else to watch. So, you know, I'm looking forward to it today. And you know, certainly we'll see what happens. But as you said, the World Cup, I feel this year, a little bit different for me, at least in the first week than years past. It felt like the first week, Joe, had less drama than it has in the past because of so many more matches. There were so many more opportunities for teams to move on. Now we're finally getting to the point where teams will get knocked out.
Out of sight, out of mind. Yeah, I mean, Team USA tomorrow night against Turkey, but much like Mexico tonight, you know, Team USA has already won their Group D, so not a lot at stake for them. Mexico has already secured the top spot in Group A. So, you know, now they started tonight. I think the youngest player in the entire World Cup, 17 years old. They've got a kid out here playing for Mexico in Mexico, which, of course, the stands are packed, and they got to have a whole lot of pride right now with a 17-year-old starting for Mexico here tonight. Not a lot at stake, but needless to say, if you're Czechia, you better figure something out because, you know, I watched their first couple of matches and it was like watching paint dry. Everything was a set piece. I mean, maybe a handful of shots on goal, nothing crazy. You know, in a lot of these games with a lot of these teams, Craig, styles make fights, right? And some of these teams, they're one style, that they're one trick ponies. If they play defense and they hope they get something offensively, but that's not at this point in the game. You know, a lot of teams who are fighting to stay alive are going to have to fight and play outside their comfort zone. And these two games here tonight are going to be prime examples here. It's just not how they don't want to take chances, but they're going to have to take chances if they're going to win or at least advance here at this point.
Yeah, I think the more compelling game of the two is probably going to end up being the game in Monterrey between Korea and South Africa, only because, again, Korea probably can tie. So it's kind of interesting to see how they end up playing this one. It would be dangerous if they play for a tie and end up losing. That sometimes ends up happening. But when I looked at the odds before and I didn't see Mexico as big as a favorite as they have been in some of the other matches, that kind of told the story for me, Joe, which is I suppose in the thinking, and again, not knowing this, certainly as well as you or some others, is that if they're not as big a favorite, and Czechia is, obviously not a very good team, it tells me that maybe there's some resting going on, or maybe there's just some anticipation that they're just ready to move on to their next round. And I assume today is Wednesday, so they probably would play this weekend. It's kind of like, if you're unfamiliar with it, with any other sport that's sort of clinched a playoff berth and then playing a couple of regular seasons down the stretch, the odds would reflect that. And I feel that's what's happening with Mexico tonight. Now, again, they are way more talented than their opponent, but, certainly, Czechia is playing for everything tonight. I mean, even with a win, I'm not even sure that they would advance, and they're not even favorites tonight. Of course, they're a pretty significant underdog regardless.
Yeah, they are, but it's also a good opportunity, and we're about 6-7 minutes in right now in both matches, and no score here. But to your point, I mean, Mexico, they're playing a lot of the guys on the bench. They're going deep. Again, they got a 17-year-old out there that's starting for the first time. So, they're playing the long game. They know it's a marathon and not a sprint. So it gives a good opportunity. Listen, Czechia is not tremendous offensively, we know that, but they have scored in both of their first two matches. So, these props, like both teams to score, both teams to be able to find the net, not a bad play at minus 110, 120 if you're looking to go that angle. With certainly in the Mexico game, I think that's the way I went with it. And to your point with South Korea, right? A tie gets it. So South Africa, again, not great offensively. Yeah, maybe you look to lay the goal and a half there, because I don't even know if they try hard, they're going to be able to beat South Korea at this point. So maybe South Korea to win by more than a goal and a half, something along those lines feels like that is also in the realm of possibility. But I like both teams to score in this Czechia-Mexico game. I know Mexico is going to get on the board, but there's no reason to think Czechia can't get at least one here, playing desperate like they're going to have to.
Yeah, and South Korea right now, at least in the early part of this one, I guess no surprise, they've been the team on the attack here. They just narrowly missed an opportunity to score the first goal of the game. And then I guess we'll keep an eye on this, because, that's a good point that you made, Joe, is to each team scoring, because once South Korea scores, you could probably see a scenario where they say to themselves, hey, look, a tie, and we're in. So why should we play anything but defense from minute whatever they score is on? And I would anticipate that happening. But they, at least in the early part of this game, as you mentioned, 7 minutes and 45 seconds in, they appear to be the more aggressive squad. Maybe they're just trying to, get this going. And, certainly, how these matches go. They can go one way or the other pretty quickly.
Yeah, Czechia just missed a wide open shot, by the way. They could have been up 1-0. And we would have been halfway on to our both teams to score bet here. But nope, there's a reason why, Czechia, you're on the verge of being eliminated. If you can't score on wide open nets, I don't know what to tell you. But we're just getting started. We got much more to go over. Great matchups again tomorrow. It's put up or shut up time. And it's also do anything but get hurt time for some teams. So makes it a whole lot of fun. We've got you covered here as in-game live game day continues on the grid. welcome back in-game live game day here on the SportsGrid Network. A very happy Wednesday evening to you as we've got the final matches here today in the World Cup on. We're keeping an eye on Czechia and Mexico happening right now, about 12 minutes in. Still no scorer, though. Czechia, believe it or not, has had the best scoring opportunity so far. We're not able to convert, and it just feels like at this point, South Korea, it's not a matter of if here, Craig, but just a matter of when they are going to put a goal in on South Africa, because they've been dominating so far the first 8 or 9 minutes here of this match, and it just feels like it's just a matter of time before they find the back of the net.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It's the game that I'm watching closely here, and you're right. Right now, Korea has had the ball on the other side of the pitch pretty much for the entire 12 minutes of the start of this one. So, look, it just remains to be seen if they can just wear out the defense, of course, of South Africa. South Africa, as we said, playing also in a knockout situation where a win probably gets South Africa in, and then it would be questionable as to whether or not Korea would get in. That is true. But the way that most prognosticators are calling it, it's basically a win for Korea or a tie today. You don't see a lot of people backing South Africa there. So certainly that's the way that they're going here. And by the way, I would add, for those people who are maybe just streaming us or, using us as a second screen, especially the stadium in Monterrey, Joe, it is beautiful, man. I mean, I don't know why I did not know that it was right on the mountain or right near the mountains. Incredible views.
Gorgeous. And of course, Mexico City, which is where Mexico is playing. Mexico's got the B team for the most part here. I mean, I think this is the third different starting rotation that Mexico has had in this World Cup, which tells you, A, they got a ton of depth, and B, since they already locked up the group, why not, right? This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. They're going to have to win a couple of more games coming up here if we're going to take it serious. But we had Canada earlier today that did not win for North America there. That was unfortunate there. Switzerland with a nice second-half goal there to be able to take the lead, beat Canada in that one. And but Team USA tomorrow is going to have a chance to have the clean sweep. And Mexico, if they can handle it, get it done here, they too will go undefeated in the group stage. So either way, Canada is advancing. Team USA's already won the group. Mexico, so a pretty good showing by the host continent at this point here, Greg. And that was a big. I know a lot of guys that played that parlay there too, as well, to have all of the host, the host nation there be able to advance into the knockout round. And but all three of them did that rather easily.
Yeah, and I would say, not a surprise, especially given the new format. And, unlike the last two World Cups, it did appear, at least on the surface, that the U.S. had the easier draw as opposed to they did the last 4 years and then the 4 years before that. But then going into their previous match, Joe, there was some question once they announced that, their captain, Christian Pulisic, was not going to play, and it really didn't make any difference, honestly, in the match. So your point is definitely well taken, Canada, and USA certainly moving on. But what I would say about both those countries, Canada and USA, I think you throw everything now out the window for the next round. Now things are going to get very serious for them, and all of a sudden you can't really afford to lose back-to-back matches, or you're not going to move on from there. But give credit where credit is due. Team USA has not had success in the World Cup in the past. In fact, every time that we predicted that they'll have any success, they've fallen completely flat. So for the first time in a while, I think there is genuine optimism and potentially well-deserved.
Yeah, no, and they a whole lot of there should be some excitement here. Both Canada, Mexico, and Team USA, they got more soccer to play, which is quite honestly what you could hope for here. You mentioned Brazil handling business rather easy against Scotland there, who just, my goodness, I know they can drink, they can play defense, but their offense went MIA in this World Cup here today. But Brazil, great job by them. And then you had Morocco also. 4-2 they beat Haiti. The game was much closer than the final score indicates because 2 goals by Morocco in the final 5 minutes of the match is ultimately what did it. But Morocco also finishing right behind in Group C. Brazil wins that group, Morocco right behind it. I got to tell you, the round of 32 is going to be very interesting here, the knockout stage, and then get to the quarterfinals. And there are some nations that have easier paths than others, the way this is set up. We know that all the teams that finish dead last in the groups, in the group stage, are eliminated. There's only the top 3 teams that finish third in the group advance. And then, of course, all the top 1 and 2s in the group flight here will advance. And yeah, at that point, there's no more Tunisias to beat up on, right? So at some point, it's going to get real, and it's going to get harder for those teams that, hey, congratulations, you finished third in your group, and now you got to take on France. Not going to be a whole lot of fun moving forward.
Yeah, so, to kind of, put a bow on what you were talking about, I mean, the first things first, I mean, Haiti, Joe, was fantastic for them just to qualify and get in the World Cup. So it was kind of like they were playing, I think, with house money to begin with. They're a country that, certainly is very small, not used to having athletics at a high level like they had in this World Cup. So that game was much closer, I think, than anybody would have anticipated. And even though I don't believe they'll be moving on, I think they should be proud of what they were able to accomplish just getting in this thing. And as you said, Morocco was the more dominant team. But the big shift in odds, Joe, came today off the foot of Vidi Jr. He's on Brazil. He scored 2 goals today, Joe. And 24 hours ago, Messi was such a heavy favorite to win the Golden Ball. That's the award for the most goals in the World Cup. But Vidi Jr., Joe, is now just 1 behind him. And I noticed both on FanDuel and DraftKings, all of a sudden, Messi's gone from this like monster favorite that you can't even bet to now all of a sudden the odds have changed. It may be those 2 guys battling it out for the Golden Ball, and Vidi Jr. was a huge dog going into this thing as far as leading this. So he is certainly the one for Brazil to keep an eye on. He had a monster game today, as I mentioned, with the 2 goals.
Yeah, you've got 157 goals so far in this World Cup. We might have a few more coming up here as in-game live game day continues. All right, welcome back in-game live game day here on the SportsGrid Network. Joe Raineri alongside Craig Mish. And, wow, we're about 22 minutes in both these games here tonight. Czechia taking on Mexico. We got South Africa, South Korea. No score in either. But I got to tell you, Greta, game you're keeping an eye on there with South Korea and South Africa. South Africa's actually had a couple of shots on goal. They've actually kind of retained possession a little bit, so not as one-sided as it once was a little earlier.
No, and Joe, look, we're still early on in this match, but two things that you can see that are apparent, at least to me, in this match. The first is that if you have the under right now, certainly you're feeling kind of secure. You're feeling good, like there's a chance of that happening. But I would also say that there's going to come a point in the match, Joe, I would assume, that South Africa is just going to go for broke here because they can't lose and they can't tie. So they're going to have to just put their full press on here. I don't know when that comes. Does it come at minute 30? Does it come at 40? Does it come in the second half? They're in a hydration break, as they say now, and then they'll come back and we'll see. But there's got to come a point where their coach has got to just tell the team, hey, look, we don't score, we're going home. And then that gets dangerous because all of a sudden, the scoring can go back and forth. Not quite as similar as hockey, but you understand what I'm saying there. So they're not, pulling the goalie or anything like that this early or doing anything like that. But I would assume they know the stakes, but you don't play like that haphazardly in the first half. But I think that would be coming in the second half.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I mean, the Cheds has had a couple opportunities on Mexico, who is playing a lot of guys for the first time, starting a 17-year-old for the first time, it's awesome. Obviously, the game's in Mexico City, so they are just they're having a good time there in the stands right now. It'd be even great if this kid is able to score, that's for sure. But I haven't seen an awful lot offensively from Mexico yet, but they already have Group A locked up. Nothing really to play for here. The only real question is both teams going to score? Because that's kind of the way I think this one is going to land. We did hear also earlier today, Team USA also already won Group D. They're advancing, and with Bosnia winning earlier today, that's who it looks like Team USA will be playing in the knockouts. But Christian Pulisic, he's telling everyone, I'm ready. Calf feels better. I'll be available to play in this game against Turkey tomorrow. But I'd be shocked if they roll him out onto the pitch tomorrow in any way, shape, or form in a game, in a match, Greg. That means absolutely nothing to Team USA. I would much rather, especially with a calf, I'd much rather ice it up, have it warm up, good to go, sit on the side. We're going to need you for Bosnia more than we're going to need you for a game against Turkey, who hasn't even won a game yet in the World Cup.
Yeah, I would assume Team USA takes this very conservatively with all their top players to get ready for the next round. And, I think you may have seen that a little bit with Canada today, where they lost to Switzerland. I think that was a possibility there. I think you're going to see it tomorrow with Germany, who's already off to a 2-0 start too. And that will bring the bigger question. And, again, not having the soccer expertise that, a lot of other folks have, is that, Joe, from a competitive standpoint, is this what the World Cup wanted, where there's going to be some non-competitive matches going on? Does it even matter? I mean, they're still selling out these stadiums, and they're saying that the ratings are the best that they've ever been. And so maybe it doesn't matter to them. And just the fact that it is the World Cup and it's once every 4 years, it doesn't matter. But you're going to have some marquee teams tomorrow and countries that are playing for nothing, essentially. And the opponent, I guess, is playing for something, but it's created a situation that we haven't seen in the past with just these extra matches where everybody has the opportunity to advance without needing a win in the final initial pool game.
Yeah, and a lot of the teams that we thought would advance have clinched. You mentioned Canada, you mentioned Morocco, Germany, also Brazil today, Mexico already through, right? Argentina also already through, Switzerland, Team USA. You go down this list and you're like, well, this was pretty much the top 12 to 15 teams that we thought would be advancing anyway, at least out of the group stage. Not a ton of surprises just yet, but I do think that Spain-Uruguay match is going to be a whole lot of fun coming up, just simply because how much noise that Spain must have heard after that opening round draw there, 0-0. I can only imagine that what kind of mood they're going to be in again for that match coming up this week. So we'll get you updated on all of it, though, as in-game live game day continues here on the grid. Protest. Welcome back in-game live game day here on the Sports Grid Network. Joe Raineri alongside Craig Mish as we have got, we got Group A on site here. Another great opportunity, by the way, by South Africa. Good save here by South Korea, and they are giving it, it's nice to see. We talked about it, right? We got two matches here to round out the day. And yeah, urgency. We got two teams that are on the verge of being eliminated. Czechia against Mexico. And they've had multiple scoring opportunities so far, have not been able to find the net. I don't think Mexico has a shot on goal yet. I'm fairly certain I've not seen them even remotely close to putting together any offense so far. And all I've seen, the best scoring chances really so far, it has been by South Africa, who's, again, back is up against the wall here. So wouldn't it be something else to see them win this thing outright, if that's even possible?
I'm not sure if you were just watching, Joe, when what just happened. They just had two straight shots on goal, and the goaltender stopped one, and then on the ground, he deflected one, and then on the ground, they took another shot, and he stopped it on the ground, too. That's the most action that I've seen thus far in this one. So you are correct. I mean, South Africa right there, just unfortunately for them, losing a golden opportunity to take the lead. In fact, Korea has not. I mean, it kind of looked initially in the first 10 minutes like they had a shot on goal. They're not calling it one officially. So as of right now, the stats say 3 shots on goal for South Africa and 0 for Korea. But I think one was kind of a shot on goal. I don't know that I would agree with that. But right now, the more aggressive team is South Africa, and Joe, they should be. If they don't score, they're out. they're out
Yep.
because a nothing
Yep.
tie does nothing for them. So they have to post a goal. But that was as close as it's going to get. 2 shots right up the gut. I thought the rebound was going to go in.
Yep. That's impressive. And it's so funny watching some of these games, Greg, in the World Cup. It's amazing sometimes what they consider to be a shot on goal and what they don't.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, they could literally kick it from, 3 all the way back by the other goal. And if the other goaltender, nobody else touches it and he picks it up, it's a shot on goal. So some of the, you could miss the goalpost by by 6 inches, and that's not a shot on goal. But yes, you could kick it from the other goaltender, and as long as the other goalie catches it, I guess that's a shot on goal. So some of those stats are a little interesting to say the least. But I can tell you just by watching both of these games, South Korea the first couple of minutes, plenty of opportunities, but it has been all South Africa. And the same thing, Mexico don't have a shot on goal. I don't even know how that's possible. I know they're not playing, the A team here, but you would think they would have been able to generate some offense at home in this spot here. But so far, Czechia looks like the more desperate team, and that's exactly what they're playing like.
Yeah, I mean, Mexico's playing for nothing, Joe. So,
Yes.
I think that's that's kind of the deal here. I mean, there is some suspense in the other match because some tiebreakers could happen, but Mexico is unequivocally 100% in, moving on to the next round. So I think that definitely factors in. And then, from a coaching perspective, you're playing, to not get hurt. You're playing more of your defensive players. So it would appear at least that's the direction that they're going. But, a nice little parlay on the unders on goals, especially in the first half of these, you'd feel awesome right now, Joe, because
Yes.
I mean, the shots did not go in for South Africa, but we're just looking, to cash the ticket at the window. We don't care how it happened. We're just caring what happened. And at this point, no goals scored in either of the 2 matches that started at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, no, it's this is, and we have always said we knew this was going to happen, especially with the extended teams, the way the tournament has been extended now, that there were going to be long stretches between games for some teams. And then we all knew that, come this third game in the group stage, a lot of these were going to be almost unbettable because, again, with so many teams already with nothing to play for, like Team USA tomorrow against Turkey, like Mexico right now, it'd be very difficult to try to find some angles. I mean, Team USA, you had mentioned, is almost even money tomorrow against Turkey. Like, who are we kidding? And again, that's mostly even Mexico tonight, almost even money here against Chelsea. And these two teams, when they play all their starters, are not in the same league. It's not even remotely close. But that's the problem when you get to this part of the group stage where one team has everything to play for and another team's like, yeah, we're good, guys. Knock yourself out. Let's see what happens. Very tough to bet these games in the group stage.
Sure. So, the big shift, at least since we started 35 minutes ago, I'll put my glasses on just so I can see better. Just normally I wear these for Newswire, but since we're just talking, I don't wear them, but I got it on. So the big shift in odds right now in both of these matches, 132 minutes in, 130 minutes in, is the tie, Joe. The ties have really shrunk in terms of the odds. So in the South Africa-South Korea match, right now a tie is plus 203. That's like nothing from where it was at the start of the game. And the same thing for Czechia and Mexico. It's down to plus 222. So Mexico's odds in terms of winning have gone down a little bit from minus 120 to minus 105. But the big shift is on the ties because I think the odds makers are just sort of telling us at this point there's a pretty good chance that these end 0-0 or 1-1 at the very most, probably at this point.
I agree, and that's exactly what we're looking at here. Is ties could very well come into play because we know South Korea could tie and still advance and have no problem. Would not shock me at all if that's how this one ends. But I tend to think I think Czechia, and going to be hard pressed for me to think that South Africa, from what we've seen, is not going to get at least one goal in this match. So they might end in a draw, but I don't think they're going to be 0-0 games here when it's all said and done, even though we're coming up on about the 37 38-minute mark here. But Mexico finally looks like they're going to have some sort of free kick here. We'll see if they can't finally get a shot on goal. This will be interesting because you got to think home field advantage matters a little bit. Didn't notice it today in the Brazil and the Brazil go, though Brazil fans were out in full force in that stadium, but Scotland was well represented here. But totally different thing when Mexico's playing in Mexico City, is it not?
You would think so, but it's like I feel like you were beating a dead horse a little bit with where I mean, at least what I am seeing is teams that aren't interested in playing or just not interested in playing. Like I'm a little disappointed because we started off the first 10 minutes of this game of the other match between South Africa and Korea with me thinking, okay, so Korea's not playing for the tie. Joe, they're playing for the tie. I mean, they are just all on defense. Yeah. So you may be right. I mean, South Africa may score. It may happen, and you may be right. But it feels like Korea is just playing all defense in this one. Like I just don't think they have any interest in doing anything except for just getting out of here with a nothing tie if they can.
Yeah, the old play not to lose situation, which is never fun. And it certainly, again, is going to what makes these next couple of games this week treacherous. So tread lightly. And again, there are levels to this. So just because a team has nothing to play for doesn't mean that they're not going to end up winning the game. And there could be great value there. But good luck trying to find those spots on some of these games with Germany and Team USA. And we were talking earlier, I think, right? France and Norway have absolutely nothing. There's nothing at stake in that match coming up. The biggest match by far, I think, this week, as we get to this third and final game in group play, is going to be the Spain game. And that's where things could get very ugly. And that could be where and it wouldn't be a shock because Spain seems to have the best team every World Cup and manages to figure out a way to lose it and not win anything. So we'll talk more about what could happen here as in-game live game day continues on the grid. right, welcome back in-game live game day here on the SportsGrid Network. Joe Raineri alongside Craig Mish as we got the World Cup on our mind as the final matches of the day underway here at about the 42-minute mark in both. Mexico at home in Mexico City, playing on Czechia, and no score here. Czechia has actually outplayed Mexico, who has nothing to play for here since they've already won the group, and they are advancing to the knockout round here. And then in the other one, I'm looking at some of these stats now, and Craig, without a doubt, 7 shots to 4 shots, I believe, for South Africa. They are handling business, and it feels like if I had to go first goal here, I'm thinking first goal's coming by South Africa because they continue to put the pressure on here on the defense of South Korea. And South Korea seems more than content to just let this thing go 0-0 if that's what it comes down to.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, You're right. I mean, South Africa's been the more aggressive team, but they absolutely blew it. They should have a goal. I mean, they had 2 strikes at it and completely whiffed, right at the goaltender, and then they just took another shot when we were on during the break, and they missed it too. But the odds makers have certainly responded to the first halves of these, which is about to come to a close, because the tie now, Joe, the tie in the South Africa South Korea is down to plus 163. The tie plus 163, opening up at 3.5. And Czechia, Mexico is being adjusted down to plus 185. As Joe mentioned, neither match have scores. And I think this is natural for what's going to happen, and it can change pretty quickly. But, this is why we're on the air, to talk about these matches, to kind of show you how it goes, because Joe does bring up a good point. It does seem like something's got to give in the South Africa-Korea match. Either South Africa is going to score, or there's going to be disaster striking today, Joe, where they go all in and they make a big mistake, and then all of a sudden Korea ends up scoring here. But I think the second half of this game in particular, you're going to just see South Africa attacking constantly. As we've talked about earlier in the show, if they don't win, they are out.
Yep. And this is there is no tomorrow here for some of these teams. It could be the last goal, could be the last time, rather, that we see them, and they're on the pitch. So get ready, because these games over the next couple of days, Greg, that's exactly what we're going to be dealing with. A lot of teams that have nothing to play for. Some teams, still, even the ones that are knocked out, there are some teams that will be playing that might very well quit because they know they're out, right? What is Tunisia playing for at this point, right? Some of these teams that they don't have, they've already, for the most part, been eliminated. Do you even get any effort here? I'm wondering how many blowouts that we're going to be in store for here over the next couple of days once we round out group stages, because there should have been blowouts if we would have Mexico starters playing, right? You would think there'd be some blowouts if Team USA starters were playing against Turkey, but let's look at the opening odds here, Craig. That's not the case over these games over the next 3 days.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I looked into that before we started here just to see if that was the case. And I guess, Joe, the narrative when it comes to handicapping these things, at least, again, not being the supreme expert on this, being expert on a lot of other things here, is that you would think it'd be a blowout. It's actually the opposite. It's teams that all of a sudden are just playing such intense defense that it makes it impossible for the other team to score, and then a team like Mexico has no interest in scoring whatsoever. So these games usually end 0-0 or 1-0. And on paper you would think that they would be blowouts because one team wouldn't care and one team does, but it's usually not the case, and we're definitely seeing that play out. And who knows, tomorrow things could be different. As we've seen in the World Cup, the first match, as you mentioned, started off with 0-0 with Cape Verde, and then all of a sudden the next day we had like 4 or 5 goals in every match. So it could certainly change, but anytime Argentina's on the pitch, you certainly know what's at stake there with Messi, and then obviously with some of the other players in this, you're going to start to see more, I would say, as time goes on. But we've hit the last 48 hours of the initial group stage, and it's just teams just trying to survive at this point. But to your point, first half shots on goal, we're in the plus 4 minute stage right now, so we're almost done in the first half with South Africa and Korea completely dominated offensively by South Africa, but they have not been able to score. and they got to be a
Yep.
little bit demoralized, I think, going into the locker room here.
I agree. It's going to be. They've had their opportunities here. Both sides have had their opportunities, but still a lot of soccer to go here. I know we got about 4 minutes of extra time here, and that's coming close to wrapping up before the first half. But could be 0-0 in both of these games as they go to break. As Group A here, that Mexico has already handled and has already won. But that doesn't mean there isn't at least one game coming up here over the next couple days that means something. And I'll go back to it. I think that Spain and Uruguay match coming up is going to be pretty epic here because Uruguay doesn't seem to be phased about Spain one way or the other. And Spain, we already saw what lackadaisical when Spain thinks they just got to show up and win. That's a different, it's a different group. So we saw a very motivated Spain last time out. But could Spain lose? Is that even possible that we could have an Spain could be eliminated? Is that really up for grabs right now?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think Spain will advance, but that first match was what really, shook everybody up. Before we break, and I know we got to go to a break here, let me give you the updated total goals on FanDuel for the matches right now. So Czechia, Mexico right now 1.5 is the number. So Joe, I'm sure you like the under there, but in that match, but it's minus 157 in that one. So would you lay a minus 157 for a 1.5? And then in South Africa, South Korea, 1.5 is also the total amount of goals. But the under, as you probably like that one too, is minus 164. So naturally, in order to really get some good odds on the unders in these matches, you got to bet under a half. You got to bet under a half a goal in both of these.
Crazy. Yeah, and I feel like next goal wins in both these matches, but crazier things have happened here. So we'll go ahead and keep you updated as far as what's happening in game live. Game day continues here on the. welcome back in Game Live. Game Day here on the SportsGrid Network. Joe Raineri alongside Craig Mish. We welcome in our good friend Marcelino Ortiz here as he is also watching these final matches of the day, but not a lot of scoring here, Marcelino. Mexico there in Czechia, 0-0, and of course, South Africa, South Korea, 0-0. What did you think we were going to get in these two games? Were you just looking at unders and more unders?
Unders and unders and more unders, because there were going to be a lot of lineup changes, and some of the players that we have on the field right now, they haven't been the scoring sensations that we were expecting. We see that Son from Korea, he was out in the first half, clearly signaling that these teams are already thinking on the next phase. On the case of Mexico, although we have Quiñones, which is probably the most offensive player that we have right now, and he's also charting high on social media, so he's there on the field. But we also have that they brought Memote, this player that I know very well because he's a Pumas player and I'm a Pumas fan. And to be honest, I have no idea how he got a ticket to go to the World Cup. He's slow. He's not. I could see it on this first half that's why he's a sub. And unfortunately, that's what we get on these third games of the group stage. Once there, everything is decided for these teams.
Yeah.
A lot of experimentation. But for Mexico, a little bit it was forced. 5 of their players had already 20 miles under their legs for the first 2 games. So it was clear that they needed to rest. Some of the players had yellow cards already. And since they get cleared for the second part of the tournament, it was intelligent from El Vasco Aguirre to rest some of these players, give some of the other ones, like the 17-year-old Gilberto Mora, a chance to shine and see if the phenom claims that we have around him are true. So far, he's doing a good job. Nothing to write home about and, start putting 10, 12, 13 million dollar tax on him. But also it's his second game as a World Cup player, and he has a long way to go. But I'm cautiously optimistic of the Mexican team. They have a hard bracket ahead of them either way. So we'll see what happens.
Marcelino is with us here, and as he mentioned, both of the matches are now officially at halftime, and we have no scoring whatsoever, and that could just play itself out. Mexico, as Marcelino said, playing very carefully, and I think that no question that Korea is doing the same. Marcelino, let me ask you about the match today. I'm in South Florida, so I was rooting for Scotland a little bit because they were out here in South Florida, in Miami. Unfortunately, they didn't, not that they didn't show up, but they didn't fare well today. So tell me about Vinny Jr. here, because all of a sudden, this player looks like he could potentially be a golden ball candidate. Catch me up on this. Was that the case going into the World Cup? I knew Messi would be one. I knew some others would be one too. But now all the prognosticators are saying to look out here because, certainly Brazil, they're going to advance, and this young player has a chance to really be something special here.
Without a doubt, I think that what we have is a spoil of riches right now in the World Cup. We have Mbappe, Messi, Haaland. We like you said, Vini, even Ronaldo, vintage performance with 2 goals. So we're seeing that these top players are taking the opportunity to make a stamp. With Vini, we know the quality of Vini. He has been working hard with Real Madrid. The problem with Vini is he's such a loudmouth that he gets a lot of negative attention coming his way. And I feel like that's something that affects him as a Brazilian player, that normally if you have the heritage of Ronaldinho, of Ronaldo, these players that just exude happiness on the field, that exude fair competition, and just technically gifted over the rest of the players in such a way that they don't need to be braggadocious about it, So with Vini, we find that a lot of negative sensations around him, and also because the selection of the Brazilian team was a little bit iffy. By bringing Neymar, that he played for the first time in 4 years with the Brazilian team, and also not using Endrick so more, and leaving Joao Pedro at home, I feel like that all of that compounded for Vini not to have such a PR machine behind him. But the reality is that he's a top player. He showed it today. And the way that Brazil is playing is everything for Vini. So I see them giving Vini a lot of game, a lot of balls, and him converting at a high rate. And also, as they move forward, Brazil knows how to win this game. They will get better and better because that's what they do. So I can see Vini being there on the top 3. Now, if Haaland and Norway are able to have a decent medium run, he could be the golden winner for sure.
Marcelino Ortiz, my friend, always a pleasure to talk soccer with you, my man. Enjoy the rest of the games here. Enjoy the rest of the evening. We'll see you again. He's Craig Mish.
Likewise.
I'm Joe Raineri. We'll see you again here for more in-game live game day on the grid.